Good morning to you all and welcome to Reset 2020. This is our 5th live show here today and great to have you joining us here today. Today we're going to be talking all about how to identify and how to indeed support our team members, our volunteers, wherever they may be around the country. My name is Julia Keedy. I am your host today. I'm also the founder and CEO of the X Factor Collective. If you've just started to find out about the X Factor Collective, welcome. We're a national organisation and community with a mission to help reduce burnout in social change makers. One of the ways that we do this is helping you get access to great support and advice at the time when you need it most. We'll tell you a little bit more about us later on in the show. Reset 2020 is part of our programming area here at the Collective, a series of live broadcasts featuring subject matter specialists from our community and interviews with really inspiring case studies. And what we're seeing is this really starting to help organisations as they navigate through the changes and the impacts caused by COVID-19. Reset 2020 is made possible and free thanks to our partnership with Equity Trustees. Before we get started today, we've got a couple of housekeeping notes for you. We are using the Zoom platform here today, and I'm sure many of you are now becoming quite expert at using Zoom. If you're not though, we're going to just share a couple of, orientate you around the screen. You can click on your chat box, and in the chat icon box over there, you'll see some extra information. If you're stuck with any technical questions, you can jump into that chat box, and we have Jackie from the X Factor Collective there helping us on tech support today. Jackie's also popping in there some phone links. So if your internet is a little bit wobbly or your internet drops out, maybe take a screenshot of those phone numbers there now so you've got that and you can dial back in. But if you can't get back in and there's a problem, don't stress at all. We are recording this and we are making the recordings all freely available over the next week to everybody. We're also here today as part of the program to really answer any burning questions that you have. We have framed up some content already for you based on a lot of the questions we have seen come in from the Reset 2020 research study. And thank you for participating in that if you have over the last couple of weeks. There's a Q&A box that you can click on here on Zoom, and we'd love to get your questions today so we can just deal with anything that's bugging you at the moment in terms of how to best support your teams going forward during this time. So welcome. Let's get into it. I'm going to introduce you and show you who I can see on my screen here today. Good morning, Adam, and good morning, Leanne.
Good morning, Julia.
Welcome. We have, as one of the aspects of the X Factor Collective is, one part of it is a community of subject matter specialists. We have about 55 very experienced subject matter specialists at the moment, and luckily for you here today, we've got two of our wonderful specialists, Leanne and Adam. Let me introduce you to them. Let me introduce you first to Leanne. So Leanne Hart founded Hart to Hart Consulting in 2018 to support social change makers to build people and culture with heart and purpose. Leanne has 18 years experience working with teams around the world across industries as diverse as construction, FMCG, travel, not-for-profit and social enterprise. Leanne combines her HR and people leadership background with her passion for changing the way that well-being and mental resilience is supported in the workplace. Leanne also draws on her experience as a personal trainer, a trauma-informed yoga teacher, and a board member for Alongside, which is a grassroots not-for-profit focused on PTSD education for the partners and families of frontline and emergency service first responders. Welcome, Leanne. Great to have you here.
Thanks, Julia. It's a pleasure.
I'll also now introduce you to Adam Blanch. Adam is a registered psychologist and the proprietor of Good Psychology, which offers clinical services and organisational training around trauma prevention and responding. Adam has over 30 years of experience working with trauma, using over 30 modalities, and has trained frontline responders in trauma prevention and fostering resilience with many organisations right around Australia. Adam is passionate about helping responders to become trauma-informed and trauma-competent, because just a little bit of the right intervention can make a massive difference in someone's life and indeed prevent years of needless suffering. Welcome, Adam. Great to have you here as well.
Thank you, Julie. It's great to be here. Thanks for having me on.
We're going to be jumping into a few areas with Leanne and Adam now, and then we will be inviting onto the show, who's just sitting in the background here at the moment, Bernadette Black from Brave Foundation shortly. Can't wait for you to meet Bernie and hear all the great things that Brave have been doing naturally over the last couple of years. There's some really great things that they've been putting into their organisation to support and build a community nurture and wellbeing model for their organisation. Before we jump into that, we're also running a live poll today, just to understand a little bit more around what your current challenges are. So I'm going to launch that live poll now. You'll be able to see that live poll if you are actually logged into Zoom. Unfortunately, if you're on a browser view, you won't be able to see the live poll. We apologise for that, but we will be sharing this information, and we'll share it a little bit more throughout the show as well, what people are telling us. You can see here in the live poll, we're asking you, what's your biggest challenge right now? And you can choose as many answers as relevant for your organisation. You can also ask your questions anonymously in the Q&A box. It is set up for you to ask anonymously. There's no questions that Leanne and Adam haven't been, had to handle over many, many years. So please feel comfortable to ask those questions, and so we can get you the support and advice for you and your teams today. It's indeed our great honour to do that. So that's off and racing. Thank you for filling out the poll. That's brilliant. So let's kick off, Adam and Leanne. Just first, let's just sort of get a read from you on what you've been seeing over the last number of weeks and months. We had Beyond Blue on the show last week. We were talking about their corporate partnership strategies, which was really interesting. They also touched on, obviously, the overall impacts of mental health here in Australia, which we're all acutely aware of. But from your perspective of working with organisations, working with team leaders, what have you noticed in terms of the impacts on mental wellbeing? I'll start with you first, Leanne.
Yeah, of course. And Beyond Blue did talk about the fact that there'd been a lot more outreach from organisations contacting them than they've ever had before, which is a big indicator that most workplaces and most leaders in workplaces are noticing it. The sorts of things that I've seen have been a bit of a roller coaster of emotions. Lots of fears, uncertainties and doubts about the future for people themselves and the future for people around them. There's been a sense of heightened anxiety in general, but also a sense of loss, a loss of community and connection, particularly for people in the workplace that may not be with their workmates. And sometimes a sense of loss around self-worth and self-identity that comes with a job and being around people all the time as well. Different ups and downs in motivations and energy levels as well. So fair to say there's been a lot of emotion going on around this period of time, and seeing all spectrums of it.
Fantastic. How about you, Adam? What are you seeing?
The same as what Leanne's said. There've been sort of three things stood out to me. On the positive side, the government response in terms of making more services available has been amazing. We've really invested a lot more in mental health. On the negative side, people actually using those services has dropped in half. And it's not, I don't think, because they don't want to use them. It's because, people are in crisis mode, they're homeschooling, they don't have time, they're trying to juggle all these balls. So kind of help-seeking behaviours significantly reduced. And people are, of course, falling back on the old staples of, I think there's been something like a 700% increase in alcohol sales, and we've seen rise in domestic violence. We're seeing a lot of distress in the community that isn't being addressed, despite the fact that the services are there, which is unfortunate. Hopefully, as things settle down, people will start reaching out for help again and get back to more optimal ways of dealing with what's going on for them.
That's really interesting. I wasn't aware that there was such a, in terms of having those services available, but people not being able to access them, obviously, at the moment. Hopefully they stay available for when people can actually access them and get to them. One of the things that we're going to jump into today is, I guess, some of the telltale signs. It's tricky working remotely and working virtually, and these are indeed some of the things we're going to be picking up with Bernadette soon. It's tricky when you're over the phone or having a video conversation with someone, and you can't always pick up those cues that you might pick up of being with someone face to face. Thank you for preparing some thoughts and comments and advice in this area. You're both going to run us through what are some of the telltale signs in both our employees and volunteers that things might not be quite right. I'm going to start with you, Leanne.
Yeah, sure. I'd love if you could share that first slide, please, Julia. And as Julia said, it can be really challenging over online technology, or even for teams where you're not connected virtually. Your only way of contacting the team or spending time with your team may be over the phone. So even harder again to be able to distinguish if things are not right or if things are different. But although we're talking about this in the era of COVID, one thing that I think is important to remember is that these signs can be there at any time. It's not just in the times of COVID. They just are a little bit more, as from my observations, a bit more escalated and heightened at this time, but still good things to think about generally for the health and well-being of your team. So noticing behaviour and reactions that are out of character for people. So whether that's response time, the manner in which they respond, the speed that they react, or blowing up over little things which normally wouldn't cause much of a reaction. If you notice them disengaging with other members in the team or the tasks that they're working on, rather than considering it might be a dip in motivation, trying to understand what could be going on that's driving that disengagement. Again, looking for extremes in change. So somebody that's unusually quiet in meetings, that's normally got lots to say and lots to contribute, that has become unusually quiet. Or the opposite of that, frenetic activity. Somebody that's normally quite calm and measured in their approach, that is running around like the proverbial chook with their heads cut off. Team members that are doing lots of doing and really, really busy, but are not seemingly getting very much done. Or talking about being uncomfortable or demonstrating that they're uncomfortable with the lack of control or uncertainty that they have around their immediate work environment, their future, or even just the medium term. It's a time that thinking short term is a really good approach, and I'll talk about that a little bit further on. And again, reduce patience and tolerance with other team members. But key to not make any assumptions about any of this, but just some things that I've observed over the years that are often early indicators. I'm sure Anne will be able to talk to that in a little bit more detail.
That's great. Thanks, Leanne, very much for that. And also later on in the show, we will be talking more about, well, once you've seen these signs, what can you actually be doing to support your team when you're noticing these things. Adam, you've got a lovely tool, which I mentioned yesterday on LinkedIn about the sad, mad, glad, bad tool, which I've always kept in the back of my mind. Not sure how effectively I've used it over the years, but can you run us through, from your perspective, this tool in terms of telltale signs as well, please?
Sure. I'd like to, really reinforce what Leanne said, that it's what we're looking for is changes in behaviour or exaggerations of normal behaviour. Can you put up the slide?
Sure.
So what people engage when they're under stress or when they're under threat is, in psychology, we call the threat responses. And they kind of fall into two categories of the protect response and the connect response. And, we recognise this in ourselves as our emotions. Just back one slide. So the protect emotions are anger and disgust or hate. And the acronym for that is MAD and BAD. It's when people start withdrawing, when they start detaching, that's a moving away from the stress. And when people start being irritable and angry, that's, you know, that's showing you that they're somewhat overwhelmed by their internal state, and they start getting into that defensive response. And the other one that we'll see a lot of is sad, which is feelings of sadness and grief and despair, low mood and teariness. And this is kind of how, as human beings, we ask for help from our group. So those are our connect responses. We look for the support of the group through displaying to people that we need help. Whether we want to display it or not, our body kind of does it without our volition anyway. And the other one that often gets missed is glad. It's like, you know, that person who's just, you know, I'm just so happy, I'm going to explode. And that's a pretty, if you see that happening in somebody, it's a pretty good sign that you know, they're at their edge, that they're just, it's too much for them, and they're just doing their best to stay on top of it, but that's not going to last for long. So it's just a nice little tool. Sad, mad, bad, or glad is a pretty good sign that, you know, one of your staff members is not doing so well.
And Adam, just on that, is there one or two of these that are sort of like any, not sort of worse, but any more serious than the other? Like if I was seeing someone who was being super happy space, is that any different to the other ones on the page here?
If it's out of character to the situation, if it's out of context for the situation, yeah, I'd treat that as a pretty good sign that, you know, that they're not coping emotionally. So they've really kind of abandoned their emotional world. Right. And, you know, they've come into this kind of presentation self. And so what they're showing publicly is going to be very different to what they're experiencing privately, and what, you know, so it's likely that person who's glad is also going to be isolating at home, has disconnected, because they've disconnected from their own emotions. They're probably disconnecting from other people. So I would say that's probably a big one to watch for. Yeah,
right. Very interesting, isn't it? The whole psychology of how we behave as human beings. Let's move on to another area. I'll just close that and make sure I close the right thing. Let's move on to another area, which is, you know, kind of looking at some of these terms. We hear people talking about burnout. We hear people talking about compassion fatigue, vicarious trauma, frontline trauma, you know, stress, anxiety, all these different terms that we hear. Can you help our audience here, and those indeed watching the recordings hereafter, just understand a little bit around the differences of those terms?
Sure. There's been a huge amount of work on this in the last couple of decades of understanding the way stress affects people. And they're compassion fatigue and burnout, vicarious trauma, are very different things, and need to be treated as different phenomenon, because they need a different response. So burnout is essentially, and there's a slide on that which isn't on the screen right now, but burnout is essentially when the demand exceeds the resources, when the expectations of the job, the work that needs to be done, the situation is too much for that person's personal resources, their emotional resources, their psychological resources. So you end up getting into what's called a chronic arousal state, which is your sympathetic nervous system is just on all the time. It means you don't rest well, you don't relax well, you don't digest well, you can't sleep. And it's over the long term, the body just can't support this. So, you know, the immune system starts to suffer, and everything else in the body starts to suffer. So burnout is really just too much demand for that person's resources. Compassion fatigue is quite separate. It's like, if anybody's working with people in trauma or in distress, we have a natural empathy reaction, or at least I hope we do if we're working with people in distress. And what that means is that we've got these amazing bits of our brain called mirror neurons that give us the ability to recreate someone else's emotional experience inside our own body. And, you know, we call that empathy. I feel with someone else. if we're constantly being exposed to someone else's distress, and we're constantly recreating that inside our own body, it gets to a point where we can't really do that all the time, because we start missing out on our own positive emotional experiences and our pleasure in life. So there's this sense of like, I'm just overwhelmed by distress all the time, and it's not even my distress, it's the express I'm being exposed to from other people, and people naturally start moving away from that. They desensitize to it, so they start shutting down their empathy. It's not volitional, they don't need to do it, but they start shutting down their empathy, being less connected to their clients, less connected to each other, because they just can't deal with that amount of negative experience going through their body all the time.
Okay.
And vicarious, probably talking a bit fast, vicarious trauma's quite a different thing. Vicarious trauma arises when people are exposed to other people's trauma, and they become traumatized by it. And it's not, what we're starting to realize is it's not the exposure to the other person's trauma that's causing their trauma. So they start developing post-traumatic stress disorder state themselves. They're in chronic arousal. Their identity, their sense of self, and their idea of themselves becomes compromised and diminished. Now, this usually happens to people who also have a trauma history themselves. So they have unresolved trauma in their past, and that will often motivate people to go into the helping services, to go into the looking after other people, after other vulnerable groups. But what we experience when we're working with vulnerable groups is often we're not able to make the kind of difference we would like to make. With some people, we can't make any difference. With some people, we can't make as much difference as we would like, just because things are beyond our control, and the circumstances of their life are beyond our control. So what the helper starts to feel is that they're failing, and this affects their view of themselves. Without going too much into what trauma is, it's that inability to help as we would like to help leads to this state that we call vicarious trauma.
Fantastic. Thank you for the explanation there, and great that, to understand that the differences and that there are different responses and obviously interventions that are needed. If you've got questions on anything that Leanne and Adam have just been talking about over the last couple of minutes, or if that relates to your organisation and you really want to understand a little bit more about these areas, please jump into the Q&A box. That's what we're here for. We are here for 90 minutes. So we're only 20 minutes into the show. If there's something there that you'd really like to know, please don't be shy to jump in and ask those questions. Thank you, Blake. I can see that you've jumped in and asked a question, and we'll jump onto that shortly for you, Blake, as well. Great seeing people jumping into the live poll here. The one that's running away as a winner here in terms of the live poll is we are seeing an increase in mental and emotional support needs. That would be no surprise to you all. 34% of you are saying at the moment that you're seeing that increase. And the next one that you're saying the most in the live poll is we can't tell if our people are okay. 24% of you are saying that. And 14% are saying we feel anxious about the future for our team post COVID-19. So thank you for sharing your challenges there. That live poll will be open for another 5 or 10 minutes. So please do jump in and share your experiences with us. Next, we are going to bring on Bernadette Black. Some of you may have heard of Bernie. I have to go straight into Bernie. I hope you don't mind, Bernie. I've known Bernie for many, many years. Bernie's been Tasmanian of the Year. She nearly won Australian of the Year for the work that she's been doing, championing teenage parents all around Australia and creating an amazing village and an amazing community to help teenage parents realise their dreams. And I'm going to bring Bernie onto the show now so you can meet her. So let me just go over there and do that. Watch this. This is magic. Where are you, Bernie? Nope. Here we go. It's a magic trick. She's just going to pop up. There she is. Hello, how are you?
Hello, Julia. I'm well. How are you doing?
Yeah, really great. Thanks for sitting in the background there.
Oh, it's been wonderful. My goodness. So it's just a fountain of information and so helpful for us, Adam and Leanne. It's been great.
Yeah, absolutely. There's certainly a mountain of knowledge and wonderful experience here today. After this conversation that we have with Bernie, we'll be coming back as well to some other questions around resilience. How do we foster resilience? What resilience really is. It gets talked a lot, but we're actually going to dive into that. How to support your team's well-being while working remotely, and much more, and your questions as well. We'll jump into your question, Blake, shortly. But Blake, you've got a young workforce and I'm just looking at your question there. So you might actually pick up on some things here, Blake, that we're going to talk about with Bernie for the next little while. Okay, so what we're going to be doing is we're going to be cutting this little segment next with Bernie and creating that as its own little video case study, which will be shared out with our partners at Pro Bono Australia next week. So I'm just going to do a quick little introduction so our editor can just cut this right here. Welcome to Reset 2020. It's great to have you here with us today. Today we are joined by Bernadette Black from Brave Foundation. Hi, Bernie.
Hello.
And here on your screen as well in a beautiful green top. I think everyone's got top envy there of your beautiful top, Leanne. It's gorgeous. Leanne Hart and Adam Blanch, both subject matter specialists from the X Factor Collective. Reset 2020 is made possible and made free for all, for anyone around Australia to access at this time, thanks to our partners at Equity Trustees. So welcome, team. Great to have you here on the show today. Now, Bernie, thank you for coming on the Reset 2020 series. Before we get into a whole bunch of questions that we're busting to ask you, the Brave Village is built on a really unique model of virtual and remote delivery, and it was one of the reasons why we were so excited to have you here today, so we can actually learn from some of the things that you've put in place to support your virtual and remote teams. But before we get into it, can you give everybody here today a bit of an overview of what the Brave Village is, who you're supporting and how remote are we actually talking with your community?
Absolutely, Julia. I'd love to do that. So Brave started because really it was my journey and my own story. So I had my son who's now 27 at 16. And so, yeah, it would be over 10 years ago now that I founded Brave Foundation, the 10-year overnight success it seems to be. But we're the only national organisation that supports teen parents specifically. And so I remembered thinking very early on, I looked for it myself about how I would be able to get help, how I would be able to get hope, and how I would be able to finish my education without having a driver's license. You know, a lot of issues at home for myself, but we certainly see that with the over 500 teen parents that we've assisted over the last year and a half. So we've been funded by the federal government for the last couple of years, and the largest program for expecting and parenting teens in the history of Australia, which is pretty exciting, and have a workforce of 21. So we have our team that work in Northern Territory, in Queensland, New South Wales, Victoria and Tasmania, and our head office is in Tasmania, and that's quite amazing that we can distribute such great help and hope to those most vulnerable all over our nation from this little island state. But going to your question of how remote will we go? For me, it was always something, you know, Brave Foundation started with me starting to share my story, really, and then I would have people wrote a book about my journey many years ago, and would have people that would contact me and ask where their student, their sister might be able to finish their education and get support. And so at that point, you know, I would actually ring. My first phone call was from Toowoomba, and I rang the hospital, I rang the school, and I worked out this virtual village for this young woman in that situation and her support people, and to be able to connect her to those opportunities that I think every Australian deserves as a human right of education, health, and social wellbeing, and economic wellbeing as well. So that's how it started. That directory of services, which was on an Excel spreadsheet, is now the largest internationally for expecting and parenting teams, and has over 800 providers on it, and we license that to the federal government. So it's quite extraordinary. But with our program, I said before, where we are in Australia on the Eastern Seaboard and in the Northern Territory, we run a program called Supporting Expecting and Parenting Teams, which is our intensive program. And our mentors are professional mentors, and they work with teenagers from their expecting stage whenever they will come to us, and it's voluntary. So it's just beautiful that they want to be able to reach out. And we have to put a lot of work into finding where these young people are to their child's first or second year of age. And one example that I would love to share is our work in Arnhem Land. And I think it's very important. We have two incredible mentors in Northern Territory that work with a range of organisations up there and do fly into Arnhem Land. And my goodness, if you have a look at the, we do the risk register before they go, and it literally has, about crossing crop-infested waters, they have to take a charter flight. So it's so diverse. Our program is so different from the middle of the city in Melbourne to Arnhem Land. And what's really important, I think, with every young person that we help is listening to that community, listening to how we might be able to help strengthen that community with the bit that we know, what we've developed in helping that particular group of people in Australia. And so one of our core values is being innovative, and we will make a way where there is no way. If you are so remote and you call Brave or you message Brave and you want some help as an expecting or parenting team, then we will find a way. And that's been pretty amazing and successful. We do work. Well, sorry, Julia.
No, you're right. That's just fantastic. I'm just wondering if we can jump into the next part of the conversation, if that's all right. And pick up on some of those things you're going to say in this as well. Since COVID hit, you have your participants and you have your mentors. So you have this amazing team that can just be deployed and connect in with your participants, with the teen parents. And one of the things that you were able to share was that there's obviously been a big spike in the support required, 240% spike in the support that's required, which obviously is putting extra demands on your mentors. Can you talk us through what have you been doing and what do you tangibly do to support your mentors to meet this demand?
Yeah, absolutely. We because we've already developed, I guess we've practiced what the world needs for the last 2 years, because we have actually been delivering our service in a remote environment and where we can face to face. But like I said before, we make a way if there is no way. So if it's needed to be digital, it's been digital. But because we did see that spike, we went from 350 meetings to 940 in the month of April. And so that was huge and massive for our team. They're all going on their own journeys in COVID with their own families. And so something that was important for us was to have daily drop-ins. So at the very beginning, which was in April, when it was quite intense, we would all remember, we actually had daily drop-ins on Zoom, and they were for half an hour. But we actually had, and it was voluntary. So it wasn't something that you had to attend, but if you wanted to drop in, you could. All of our staff attended those, I think, for the first 10 days, because there was so much news coming to hand. And that was really, really important for us. We also purposefully looked at how we could support our team in ways. I'm really interested in being able to elevate people's strengths. And so take real notice of that, and in my one-on-ones with staff, able to say what I could see and what I think will be their strengths going through this time for themselves personally, but also for Brave as well. And so we did some unique things, like sent out a little trinket just, to show them how important they are in the Brave village, a little Brave necklace. during this time, and it was important that it was in this time. We did the same thing with our expecting and parenting team, sent a book to each participant. So, you know, my hand got really sore after doing that, but to be able to bring some of that light in a time where it is quite difficult. It's also been really important for us to make sure that we're supporting our staff, yes, in drop-in centre, but also one-on-one. So we have a buddy system, which we've had since day one, Julia, and we've talked about that. And that's grown to be really led by staff now. So they are able to actually input how that works, and it's amazing. And so those buddy sessions happen each week too.
Can you tell us a little bit more about your buddy system? That, I mean, this was all set up pre-COVID, and as I understand it, you know, you've been putting in place, like, how do you be, I love you say, how do we be the most connected remote village in Australia? And so you've naturally been putting in place a number of practices and measures that a lot of organisations now have to think about in terms of how do we stay connected? How do we do this virtually and remotely for an undefined period of time? The buddy system, can you take us back to a little bit around, you know, the simplicity of how you've created that, but also share with us how that's actually evolved as well?
Absolutely. So when we came into the trial, we went from a staff load of 2.5 to 21 staff overnight. And so because we were all remote and in very different locations of Australia, we knew that for Brave values to be able to shine through, but for our staff to be well supported, that we wanted to create a staff village around them as well. So we were really front-footed about that. So at the very beginning, it was pretty much as basic as a straw poll, where you would pick out a name and, oh, you know, Jenny got matched with Eva, or whatever it might have been. And so that was really brilliant, because it was something that we had found out with our workforce, and it didn't matter if, you know, what your role was. It's a buddy system. So it's quite different to having a direct report or you know, your one-on-ones of performance, anything like that. It's a buddy system, and it's hanging out together, being able to check in on each other and get to know each other a bit more. And we didn't have the opportunity to go and have a cup of tea or, you know, hang around the photocopier or anything like that. So we had to be really purposeful in that. So that's now something that the staff actually guide themselves every week. Usually that there is a social connection point, which will happen with more of the buddy systems as well. And so they will also drive that themselves, some of which we all will come to. We actually had one of our incredible staff members go, she was seconded to us for 2 years, and that finished. And we had an incredible celebration with her online. But this is something, it was during COVID. And we did all sorts of fun things. It's amazing. We've done Christmas, you know, secret Santas and have sent them out, our secret Santas, via post, and then open them up on Zoom together. It's quite amazing when you can look at how you can create, like I said, our aim was the most connected remote organisation in the world, a pretty bold vision, and I'm sure we still have a lot to do in that space. We also use Teams, and Teams is great because we can just have chats happening all the time, and it almost feels like you're in the room together. And I think that we can become face-to-face is always what we find is most important, because we can't see each other as a staff workforce. You do pick up, especially in those bigger meetings with your staff, or your staff meetings, which we have every month, and 21 are on board. You do pick up and look at people's body language. You become more intuitive in that, and I think that that's a great opportunity then for us to be able to pick up those conversations and check in afterwards.
Yeah, fantastic. Another one of the things that you put in place in this whole sort of remote and virtual world that you all live within is, and I love how important you've made celebrating the wins, regardless of how small they are, and that you have a town hall sort of strategy for that, or you use a town hall approach for when you want to sort of celebrate news and celebrate wins. Can you tell us a little bit about how you use that? What sort of wins do you celebrate, and what's the effect that has on the team?
Absolutely. And we do call them town halls. And it was quite, interesting at the very beginning. We actually had another staff member who was a similar age to me, and she thought it was literally at the town hall. And she was heading there, and that's okay, because this whole language of having a town hall on Zoom is actually quite different to what we've been used to before. And so we all physically come together at a town hall, and it's like coming to a town hall presentation if you would go with your local council in the actual town hall. And so it's an important announcement, it's an important celebration, or it's an important matter for the organisation as a whole. So there can be it's both ends of the spectrum there. And we've certainly used our town halls for those opportunities. I think what it does is when we put out and communicate we're going to have a town hall with our staff, it heightens an expectation. So they know already that it's going to be something that's important, and we always have 100% attendance. We recently, and I know that Sue's on the line here as well, we finished an incredible impact report, which we did with Sue Vittori. And so that was a massive celebration moment. The amount of work that went, you all know, the amount of work that goes into a 70-page beautiful story of your organisation is just epic. And it took, 21 of us, a whole lot of blood, sweat and tears to do that with the team, Sue, through X Factor. And so that was, it was incredible, but such an accomplishment. And so when that was actually produced, it was one of those opportunities to have a town hall environment and to present that report to the staff before anyone else ever saw it. They were the first people that we wanted to make sure would see that. Another perspective of that is when we've had difficult times with funding and not knowing how things are going to be, especially in this environment, and being able to have those more serious conversations as well. So I think that the terming of what we call our meetings can really be helpful for our team.
Yeah, absolutely. And you said there that you get 100% attendance rate. In terms of the feedback that you get from the community and from the team, how does it make them feel having the town hall meetings with the team?
They feel really valued because they have the opportunity to have connection and communication from, usually it's for me, for CEO, or it could be management if it wasn't me. And there's also the opportunity to be able to have questions depending on what the type of town hall that it would be that you'd be having. So it's something that we have found to be very successful and we continue to do.
Yeah, right. Great. Just picking up on that sense of connection, and I'm going to just invite you, Adam, to just sort of reflect on this, that sense of connection. And we've heard the word a few times today already around belonging and how important belonging is. Adam, can you go into this a little bit for us? When we hear belongingness, we obviously all instinctively know that it's important, but during this time, we're really challenged by it, obviously. So what, from a psychologist perspective and a sort of forensic understanding, what's happening or what happens to a person or a team when that sense of belonging is removed?
I think, the whole world of psychology has been a little bit behind on this in terms of, we've tended to treat mental health as if it was an individual thing. But over the last couple of decades, mainly due to the work of Stephen Porges' polyvagal theory, we've had this kind of explosion of understanding that, we're not separate kind of nervous systems. Like everybody knows about the kind of the arousal system and the rest system, but what we've been discovering is there's this kind of third nervous system in people, which is called the vagal system. And it's really there to, so that we can co-regulate, so that, if one human being is in distress, what we instinctively do is look for another human being who isn't. So it's a bit like kind of pouring cold water into hot water. If we're all too hot, we look for somebody who isn't. And what we do as a social species is that we co-regulate with each other. When a child's in distress, it naturally goes to a parent to kind of go, or an adult to go, hey, I don't know what to do with this. You look like you're a bit calmer than me. Maybe you could help me with this one. So there's this very direct interaction that happens between people that if I come into the presence of somebody who's distressed, then my arousal system naturally kicks in an empathic way. So my levels come up, and their system kicks in and it comes down. So and you know, we see this in organisations when the stress is on, we naturally look to the leader, and we're really hoping that the leader looks like they've got their stuff together right now because nobody else does. If the leader's freaking out, then everybody freaks out. So there's this real, really important, the mental wellness is not just about the individual. It is about the community. It is about who you're connected with. And of course, what COVID's done is just disrupt that enormously, that in the moment, in presence with other people, interaction has reduced. And has left people isolated, it's put them in distress. So that sense of belonging, I mean, there's other elements to it that we need to feel like we're valued in our group, that we make an important contribution to that group, and that, you know, as an individual, we are uniquely valued, but that sense of there is a group, and when I need it, that group will be there for me, and I can be there for them. That's also a really big part of human beings feeling good, is that I have the opportunity to be there for others.
Yeah, beautiful.
I mean, what, you know, Bernie's model is just amazing. I'm glad you've done a report, because I was going to say, let's do a report and share it with everybody else, because it's really the essence of wellness in this community.
Thank you for sharing that. I want to jump into a couple of more things, Bernie, that and hopefully this is really helpful for you listening in here today live with us. And if you're watching this as a recording afterwards, hello and welcome to Reset 2020. Bernie, there's a couple of other things that you've put into your practices, and this is what I'm really keen and love about today, is that we can hear about these, because I think these are the types of things that people can go away with today, with some tips and from Leanne and Adam, and some of the things that you've been putting in place to, I guess, hold that fabric together of the community. One of the things that you picked up on earlier before, and I just wanted to go into, was, it's a small element, but I guess it's adding all of these up, which is the impact. And it was when you talked about sending out a small trinket in the post. Can you talk just a little bit to that? Because there's probably something in this over the next couple of months that might be something that others can take into their organisations.
Yeah, absolutely. So, you know, we just wanted to do something that was lovely, something that actually, we're a real values-driven organisation. So anyone that joins Brave, you know, they will actually share with the staff when they come in what value resonates most with them at Brave Foundation. And so even for me, in looking at sending out, you know, those little necklaces during this time, I sat down, I took myself away from any, you know, you get CVs of your staff and bios and that type of thing. And I took myself away from that, had a bit of a blue sky day, and just got a piece of paper and wrote down all of our staff members' names. And then actually just spent some time thinking about who they are and what I see in each of them. Just that. And it was quite incredible, because what we often see, we sometimes don't see ourselves, and particularly with hearing what Leanne and Adam were sharing about before, when we're heading into a time where we might be mad, sad, bad, I can't remember the other one, Adam. Glad, that's right, that you can almost forget, I've been there myself, who you are. You can almost forget the strength of what you bring to the group. And everyone is different, thank goodness. Everyone has different skills, everyone has different strengths. And when we're sharing those times of real weakness, that we can actually bolster each other up with the strengths that we can see. And so, you know, that's been incredible, because when I've been able to, we also have what we call skip level meetings. And I'm not sure if I should go into this now or not, Julia, but certainly in those meetings, being able to call out the strengths that you see, being able to, you know, say, well, this is how I see you interact with the team, or this is how I see, you know, our participants receive such great work from you, and it is different for each person. And so I think that intrinsic value of your team members, not just the role they do, but who they are in the greater world, is more important now than ever. And, you know, can sometimes open up a conversation and provide, it's just someone being interested in who you are, isn't it? Like, actually, this no actually cares about who I am, not just the job. Yeah, you might be able to have an honest conversation from that when it's genuine.
Bernie, I'm going to talk a little bit more about skip level meetings in a minute. But I do want to come back to what you're just talking about, the strengths, and reflecting back to people. And it's one of the things that I love about what you do and who you are as a human being is this very simple but beautiful notion of, and I think you were saying to me last week on the phone, people present themselves in their CVs with their strengths and who they see themselves to be. But the impact that we can have on people's sense of self and of well-being and identity through having it reflected back by somebody else at a time when people might not be expecting to receive that. Can you give us an example, without naming names, but can you give us an example of, you know, a time when you've done that it's just really been what, you know, that person in the team needed and has made a real difference? Yeah,
absolutely. Oh, for sure. You know, I can remember in this period of time, you know, it's been difficult for everyone, but with one of, it's not one of my direct reports, but in a skip level meeting, being able to call out some of the things that I had seen in her and what that had brought to the team in this time. And it was really about just this strength of solidarity and not getting too flustered, but it's a part of who she is. You know, that could be, it's a part of who she is, which is so different. There's just this consistency and thoughtfulness that brought such strength to the team. And I was able to say to her, you know, what I see and I have seen continue during this time is this consistency and solidarity that you really show to everyone, and it really creates a safe place within Brave Foundation. And it was just amazing because this woman, she's quiet, she's more of an introvert. She had no idea the impact she had, and you know, being able to talk to, and she could see it in herself though. When you were actually bringing these words, she could see that in herself. She's like, no, that is what I do. That is how I behave in a professional environment. But to see that that's what we actually need and respond to as a team, and that it's who she is, was pretty remarkable. So it was lovely to be able to have that conversation.
That's gorgeous. I'm going to bring in Leanne at this point in time. Leanne, you've worked across a number of teams, you know, as small as, you know, 3 or 4 or less, through to 3,000-4,000, you know, in large organisations. And I'm just wondering if you could pick up from your perspective on some of the things that Bernie has shared with us, some of these simple tactics and strategies that do go a very long way. And I guess your own observations as well around how that helps to create that really sort of high performing and supportive team environment.
Yeah, certainly can. So much of what Bernie was talking about resonates, and such beautiful examples of leadership, both in times of crisis and times of regular leadership. It's just, you've set a very high benchmark there, Bernie. A couple of things that I picked up on is the communication and how authentically you're communicating with the team. And that's really important. You know, through any sort of change, being able to talk about what you know and what you don't know. I think it's important with teams that we're pretty honest about that. What is the situation at the moment? You might be leading the team, but you don't necessarily have all the answers, and you're not in a position where you can predict what things are going to look like in 2 or 3 months' time. So staying honest about what that looks like, but communicate, and doing it regularly, doing it often, and doing it in a multiple variety of ways, informally, more formally, with town halls, using written communication, verbal communication, online, phone, whatever it takes, but keeping those lines of communication really open and accessible to everybody. That's been particularly successful from across any team that I've seen. Also providing clarity for people, and it might only be clarity around the tasks that they're working on at the time. So rather than, I see people get very overwhelmed during a lot of change, and it can be quite hard to focus on one thing without skipping from one thing to the next. Being able to provide that clarity around what's important, what to prioritise, but linking it back to how it fits into what the organisation is trying to do as a whole. And it sounds like Brave Foundation's got some amazing values and amazing purpose that everybody is very connected to. And at times like this, it's even more important to keep people connected to what you're ultimately trying to do. Staying positive about the possibilities. So it's not, COVID is very challenging for a lot of people, but it's not just doom and gloom. It doesn't have to be doom and gloom. So being that person that you might be the swan on the top of the water that is just gliding along with your feet madly paddling underneath, but still being able to provide some glimmer of what the future might look like, and the possibilities that this new way of working could open up for us. Some other things that I loved, and I thought you talked to beautifully, Bernie, was the sum of all the parts. And it's not just one thing that you do to help a team through a tough time. It's a little bit of everything. And it is the communication, it's the caring. The caring is super important. People want to know that you care much more than they want to know what you're doing or how well you're doing it. That's what they'll remember in 6 months' time when all this is over, is the care and the support that you've provided for them as a leader. Yeah. And the ritual that you talked about, sharing strengths, is another really beautiful one. And I've often approached it as asking everybody in the team to do that as a bit of a team activity together, and pick one thing that you appreciate about each of the other people in the room. Works particularly well with smaller teams, just to go around. You could do it on a weekly or a monthly basis, but what you might be, I appreciate this about you, Julia. And again, it's letting people see their strengths through other people's eyes, and a bit of positive reinforcement that there might be a lot of really challenging things happening at the moment, but there's still a lot of goodness there as well.
Absolutely. Beautiful. Thank you for that, Leanne. I'm just having been looking at the live poll over here, and I want to pick up something, Bernie, you mentioned it before with the skip level meetings, and we'll come back to it now. In the live poll, a lot of people have said, we can't tell if our people are okay. And one of the things that I love about the skip level meeting, and I was just hoping you could speak to this, how the skip level meeting works within the organisation, if people haven't used this before, but also Bernie touching on how you create that little bit of uncomfortable silence and the not rushing in part. If you can speak to that around how that allows for people to be able to share that they're not okay, just as a really simple, beautiful tactic today.
Yeah, absolutely, Julia. I'd love to. And so the skip level meeting we commenced towards the end of last year, actually, and it'd be something that I would, recommend anyone do, because it's been such a strength to our organisation. And so what it means is that you're actually, it's not your direct reports that you have your skip level meeting with, it would be the people that report to your direct reports. And the brilliance of it is that you can, for that, it is for that, for me, and also for the managers and executive team within Brave Foundation, is actually being able to care for your staff well and hear how they're going, and then being able to share that with who they actually report to directly with their permission, so that we can work out how we best can support that person. But in the uncomfortable silence that Julia just made a comment about, it's actually really important. So there are 3 questions that I will ask in my skip level meetings. And the first one will be, so how are things going? What's top of mind? And then waiting. And then if nothing's coming forward, or, it's, no, nothing, everything's okay, it'll be, is there anything keeping you awake at night? And then waiting. And then often it might be, and what I would actually say it's important to do, you know, when you start to feel that feeling, and you can probably even feel it now because I'm slowing down my voice, but that feeling when you have the silence and you want to feel it, but you go a bit past that feeling, a bit past that, so, you know, 30 seconds or so, until you're feeling like, oh, this feels really uncomfortable. Often when you get to that point will be when I find the other person will start to talk.
Yeah.
And so it's hanging in that it's discomfort, it's actually caring, and it's actually intense listening, and being aware. And so that's the experience when you push, you go yourself just past that uncomfortable feeling of silence. It's the hanging around the photocopier. It's hanging around getting a coffee. It's the, you know, that time when you're just standing near someone and you pick up that vibe and body language of, is anything okay here? And so I think it's very rare that people wouldn't speak about how things are going at that point. Then after that, I'll usually invite them to say, have you thought about how you might be able to help in this situation yourself, or have you got any ideas of a way forward? And then after that, again, is there anything else? Because often once you've said something once, then you started a conversation, and then how can I help you with those things? So it's you know, three questions, but I think it's and then some of the goals that will come out of that, true things that we do need to care for our teams and staff, being able to say, you know, it's a different perspective, and hearing that, if I'd love to share this with your manager, then we can look at how we can help you more in this. Is a real window of opportunity moment, and hopefully helps that people feel very supported in that.
Yeah, beautiful. No, I love that, and hopefully that's helpful for you all here today, listening into that, around the you know, combining some of the things that Adam and Leanne have said at the start of the show with some of the things that you're hearing from Bernie today, in terms of not being able to tell how if people are okay. And I guess practicing that uncomfortable silence, maybe practicing that with somebody else before you try that, even practicing that with some family members, practicing that digitally and virtually as well. How do you actually, I could actually feel that in my stomach then before Bernie. I could actually feel that sense of, we do that naturally, don't we, wanting to fill the space all the time. So, you know, maybe practicing with people to actually do that and give people that space to be able to really tell you what's going on for them. We're going to start to wrap up this time that we've had here with you, Bernie. I'm sure we could go on for hours more, and so many beautiful gems. But just to wrap up, Leanne, Adam, I just want to come back to you. Any sort of final observations and comments that you think are really pertinent here today that our audience can take away? Adam, I'll go to you first. Okay.
Just amazing, Bernie. To me, that's that what you're saying about the silence. I love that certainly in Australian Aboriginal culture and in a lot of Indigenous cultures around this world, there's this idea that a meeting takes as long as it takes. You know, there's no end point to a meeting. It's like we sit down, we allow the silence to be there until something comes into that silence, and we stay there until it's done. And it's that sort of allowing that, and certainly in the world of, you know, part of being a therapist is really just being able to be with people in their pain without acting too quickly to try to resolve that pain. It's like that because people need the opportunity to be able to sit in their pain so they can start resolving it themselves. So it sounds like a great system you have. Thank you.
Beautiful. And Leanne?
I've found that I can use that silence quite effectively in meetings and workshops, either virtually or over the phone, in a similar way, but as an open-ended question, like, what else? And when you ask what else, people usually take the opportunity to think about, and if they give you an answer, say, what else? And it just opens it up and keeps that space open, rather than them just feeling uncomfortable with the silence. It's enough silence for people to feel comfortable to share, but not so much silence that it gets too awkward. And I have seen that work fairly effectively as well. So just something that I like anyway.
Beautiful. And I like what all of you have picked up on in terms of that it's not then about jumping in with the solution, but actually, Bernie, you said it before, was, well, what do you see is possible here for yourself? And allowing that, and this I think speaks to some of the other questions and comments that we've seen around people talking about anxiety and all the things that are happening for people, is I guess giving people a sense of that they can actually have a solution for themselves when they're in that space, and then you can come into that space if they want you to. Just to wrap up here, Bernie, what would be your sort of final tips if you had, you know, other organisation leaders coming to you today going, you know, we're really struggling. Have you got any other gems other than everything that you've shared here today around, you know, identifying and supporting team members who might be struggling at the moment?
Yeah, I think the only other thing that I would say is know your team. You know the people that you work with. It's something, again, when you have the opportunity to breathe with someone, to hang in that uncomfortable, the silence, invite how do you think you might be able to overcome that, or what steps do you have, and then how could I help? But also, if you know your team and you know your people and you know that someone loves Kung Fu and that they haven't been able to do that for 2 months because of social isolation, what are they doing? If they're out, you know, 5 nights, you know, 7 nights a week playing netball, you know, what are they doing to be able to keep that part of who they are alive in a different way? You know, there could be a myriad of different things. I think knowing your people is really, really important.
Yeah, beautiful. Excellent. Well, Bernie, thank you so much for being here today. Thank you for taking us behind the scenes and under the hood with Brave Foundation, all the things that you've been putting in place to be this most connected remote village. Did I get that right? Most connected remote village in the world. We love your vision. We love that you've created that and that you're able to share that. And we're so excited to be able to share this recording here afterwards for many, many more hundreds of organisations to be able to listen in and hear some of these great things that you've put in place. So thank you so much. If everyone can just help me give Bernie a virtual round of applause. And I'm just going to pop you off to the side there, Bernie, and look forward to hopefully having you back on the show. I know we touched on a lot of other topics last week when we spoke, so I think we might be seeing you again, and that would be an absolute pleasure.
That would be lovely. Thanks so much.
Take care. All the best.
See ya.
All right, and just pop Bernie off there over to the side and just pop you on mute. Feel free to stay with us, Bernie, or drop off if you need to head off. That was amazing. So excited for you all to hear from this extraordinary woman and an amazing organisation. Go and have a look at them, Brave Foundation. I noticed a couple of people have asked about the report, and we can find out a little bit more about the availability of that. That's actually something that team members in the X Factor Collective have worked on. And I'm just going to share with you what I can see here in the live poll. It hasn't changed very much in terms of what we were talking about before. A couple of you have said that you feel nervous about doing and saying the wrong thing. A lot of you have said you feel anxious about the future for our team post-COVID. So I'm just ending that poll now and sharing the results of that so you can all see that. This is actually, the live poll is there to actually help us frame up and look at what other shows we can create for you to actually help with some of these challenges. So that's what we're doing there with the live polls. Leanne and Adam, I'm just going to jump into a couple of these questions that have come through. We've got a few that have come in here now, and then we're going to jump into some of the other questions that we have around resilience and how to actually really help our teams. The first one here is from Blake. Hi, Blake from Sydney. Hi, Blake. We have a young workforce, 20 to 35-year-olds on average, and we're experiencing more staff applying for leave for wellbeing reasons. any tips on managing free-for-all leave versus supporting staff to work through the issues while staying at work? Thank you. Leanne, can I get you to have give us some information there for Blake that might be helpful?
Yeah, I think it's a really important question, Blake, and something that I expect will probably come up more and more for organisations in the future as we're seeing some of the delayed impacts of mental health as COVID has progressed and everything that people have gone through. It's not just going to magically disappear once things open up again. There will be some longer term mental health impacts from this that I can see certainly in the workplace. One of the things I'd encourage you to think about with your team is what the mentally healthy workplace looks like for you and your team. And getting a sense from the team whether that the need to take leave is because of anxiety, because of something in the workplace that they're not clear about. So firstly, build that understanding of the impact that it's having on them personally, and then talk through and have them suggest the potential solutions for that rather than creating a free-for-all leave. I think having the amount of flexibility and being able to allow people to take the leave as they need it is really important, but understanding what it is that they really need is probably more important. So is it flexibility around hours? Is it less time on the screen because that's impacting them? Is it that they're feeling challenged and overwhelmed with the workload? So building that understanding of the driving factors for it, rather than creating a leave policy as a Band-Aid solution. That would be my very short answer to that, but it probably sounds like something that we could discuss it at more.
Yeah, fantastic. Thank you, Leanne. Blake, maybe just jump into the chat box and let us know if that's been helpful or anything else you need clarified around that. Talking of anxiety that just came up in that question, I'm just going to drop into another question here. Adam, I've heard you speak a lot about anxiety. Sue has got a question here saying, at the moment, she's hearing from a number of colleagues and associates who don't have a history of living with anxiety that are feeling very, very anxious a lot of the time at the moment. And they aren't equipped to manage the anxiety because it's such a new experience for them. Can you please give some tips about the most effective ways of dealing with the pervasive anxiety triggered by COVID-19 and the state of the world at the moment?
Love to. Before I do, could I just say to Blake, everybody's under a lot of stress and a lot of pressure, and they've got a lot more on their plate than normal. Make work fun. Make work a sanctuary. Make work a place where people come to de-stress. So increase the fun element at work, and give them a reason to be there rather than a reason to be somewhere where they can get away from the stress. Anxieties are, we tend to talk about anxieties if it's a bad thing, and certainly too much of it is a bad thing, but it's also a necessary part of life. Where people get into trouble is, it's hard to describe this. We have a natural emotional threat response system. Part of that system is fear. Fear says there's a threat present, pay attention to it, make an assessment, do something about it. Often we can't, and particularly in, there's nothing much we can do about a pandemic except do social distancing and that sort of thing. So people get anxious when they're confronted with a threat that they feel unresourced around. I have no response to this. There's nothing I can do to stop this threat or manage this threat, or at least that's what I perceive the situation to be. And so then what happens is we leave our body, because we've got these emotions going in our body. We don't know how to respond to them. We leave our body, we get up into our head, and then we get into the world of imagination. In the world of imagination, somebody said very beautifully, the best use of imagination is creativity, the worst is worry. And so we start imagining, impending disaster. So instead of responding to our fear and being with our fear, we get up and we start trying to control the environment. We control other people, control ourselves, control the world, and of course we can't. You know, the reality is that most things are beyond our control. The best we can actually do is respond to environment. So what I say to people with anxiety, you know, come back to your body. You know, fear will not overwhelm you unless there's a very direct, present, real, intense threat present. But if we leave our body and we get into our head, then we start imagining the worst. So it's like, come back into the body. So, you know, I spend a lot of time teaching people just to breathe. Breathe into your body and be with your feelings. Feelings have a job to do. They're there to deliver information. Once you've heard them, they go away. If you don't listen to them, they just get louder. They just get stronger. And then we're in a war with our feelings. Our feelings are getting stronger, and now we're getting anxious because our feelings are getting stronger. And it just kind of feeds on itself. Anxiety has this eating its own tail kind of thing going on. The way out of anxiety is to come out of the head and come back to the body.
Beautiful. Hopefully that's helping you there, Sue, with some tips that you can share with your colleagues and associates. Maybe jump into the chat box and let us know. Thank you, Adam. I feel like we could almost do a whole segment just on that topic with some examples, and maybe we can let us know if that's something that would be helpful for you. Brenton, I'm just acknowledging your question. I didn't see that that was a question there for Bernie on the skip level meetings. If anyone would like more information about the skip level meetings, we could possibly get some more information there as well. I know from speaking with Bernie though, Brenton, that, and sorry, probably people can't see Brenton's question, was did Bernie involve people from outside of the organisation in the skip level meetings? And my understanding from Bernie is that it's actually internal in terms of who's actually involved in the skip level meetings. So hopefully that answers your question there. Thanks, Brenton. We do have another question here, which I'd like to try and weave some of this maybe into some other material that Leanne and Adam have prepared for us here today. And that's an anonymous question saying, who cares for the carers? And this is a really big point. Who cares for the CEO? Who cares for the leaders at the top who are trying to be there and hold it all together? We all have strategies and supports, but it is something that I wonder about. Thank you for whoever has put that that question and that comment there in Q&A. And Leanne and Adam, I'd love if you could sort of reference that as we get into this next part of the session. And Bernie's just said online, happy to help offline. Bernie's still there. Thanks, Bernie, very much for that. Bernie, maybe you might just pop in the chat box there. Do you actually involve anyone from outside the organisation in your skip level meetings? That was the question that we had there before. Love that there's still some extra support happening there in the chat box. Before we jump into, we're about to start talking about resilience, and we're also going to start talking about some strategies. What are some of the things that we can do to support our teams? Before we do that, I'm just going to show you a couple of quick things. As you've probably started to really get a sense of from being here with us today and maybe over the last couple of weeks as well, the community of specialists at the X Factor Collective is an incredible community of people. I call them like-hearted and like-minded people. We're really trying to make it easy for you to be able to find and connect with people that know their content really well, but also care about you getting the support that you need. So I'm just going to show you a couple of ways that what we're doing to sort of help you with that. One is that we're building this community of specialists who go through quite a number of reference checks and background checks to be a part of this community. And it's great because they end up being able to work with each other on projects as well, but also making it easy for you to be able to come and find people in the community. So everyone has a profile page. You can jump onto our platform at any time and search under a very broad range of categories there. So you can see in the advanced search, you can look for people that might be from a specific cause area, for example. You can see all the different cause areas that we have expertise in. And also, if you can't find someone in that way, we do have a sector first initiative, which is called our concierge service as well. And this was built off the back of what I had seen for 10 years of being in the sector, that there was nowhere to actually go have a conversation with someone about what you needed in your organisation right now. So you can jump in there and have a look at some of our consultation services that are available through the concierge. And this is really working with people who can just spend time with you to look at what it is that you might need, make some suggestions based on the different people that we know who are in the collective or who are joining the collective. We're growing out to be 150 specialist businesses over the next 12 months. And so we've got someone here for you at any time that when you need that help. It's a beautiful community, and I'm very proud to be what I call the chief cheerleader of. Let's jump back into it here now. I'm just checking any other comments there. Thank you very much for those who are jumping into the chat box there. Let's drop into, please feel free to drop in any other questions that you might have as well in the next 10 minutes. Let's jump back into some other questions that we've had in advance of the show here today that you, Leanne and Adam, you're going to run us through some material here. The first one is around resilience, and I'm going to get you to jump into this, Adam, and Leanne to share as well. Just some understanding of what resilience really is and how can we foster it further in our teams.
Okay, so if you could put up the first slide, please, Julia. Resilience has been a bit of a buzzword for the last 20 years, and there's an unfortunate trend to think of resilience as being something that a person has, like it's a part of them. And what I really want to put across is that everyone has resilience. Resilience isn't natural, but it's not one thing. Resilience, it's many things, and people will have different skills and different traits and different versions of resilience, which is why it's so important that, you know, people operate as a group, because we bring different resources to that group. So I've just put up some photos and some ideas that the resilience is strength, resilience is cooperation, it's hope, it's adaptability, it's innovation, it's courage, it's a whole bunch of other stuff as well as that. So resilience isn't something we have, it's something we do. And it's when we kind of identify our unique strengths and how we can use those strengths to meet our needs and to meet the needs of the group. And also, you know, if we need resources, we need other types of strengths, then we go to other people for those sorts of strengths. So resilience is both individual and it comes from the sense of belonging and the inclusion in the group. But it's something we do. It's not innate. It is innate, but it's not just a thing.
Okay.
It's actions we take.
And so for those who are listening here today, if they're all of the components of resilience, how can you further foster those components of resilience in a time such as COVID?
So, and next slide. Resilience really is about human beings meeting their needs using their strengths. There's another slide to come up. Is that not showing?
It's coming.
Okay. Thanks, Sue. So it's kind of, I would say that the core of resilience is connected. It's connected to self, connected to others. Part of resilience is physical health. We you know, it's like the healthy body bounces, it copes with stress, it does things well, you know, getting exercise, having good nutrition, you know, having your blood sugar regulated properly. A body that's in a well state is not generating stress. So when stress comes at us from the outside, it's kind of like a trampoline. There's something there to cope with it. But if we're physically not getting exercise, not eating well, not looking after ourselves, not getting rest, then that stress will easily overwhelm us. So, you know, unfortunately, what people tend to do under crisis is they forget about themselves. And it's just putting that back in and going, okay, if my body's well, I have the resources to deal with life. And the next one is connection. You know, human beings are social animals. We're not particularly good at surviving unless we're in a group. A human being kind of alone in the wild in most countries is some other animal's breakfast. So But as a group, we're the apex predator. As a group, we're the strongest. So keeping that connection to our group, to our family, to our friends, without that, we become quite weak. And together we're quite strong. So making sure we're keeping that emotional connection and we're connected to the group. Coming down to the individual level, a really big part of resilience is being who we want to be. It's being aligned to our values. It's being aligned to our purpose. And what that does is it gives us natural motivation and it gives us natural drive to be engaged in life. If somebody's kind of engaged in a life in a way that feels wrong to them, that they're not aligned with who they feel themselves to be, their motivation will drop, and that and they won't be able to deal with life nearly as well. And then the psychological part of resilience, which we could do days on, is really about the story we tell about ourselves. If I tell myself the story that I'm, weak and incapable and incompetent and unworthy, and I've kind of defeated myself before I've even entered the game. So being able to tell that story, that, to find out what my strengths are, not expecting myself to be great at everything. I know me, I'm never going to beat Roger Federer at tennis, but doesn't mean I can't enjoy playing tennis. But it's finding out what my strengths are, building the capacity around those strengths, and telling a good story about myself will naturally lead to a good attitude. It will naturally lead to I've got this, I can do this, I can move forward in life. Yeah, there's going to be challenges. Yes, it's going to be difficult. But between me and the group that I belong to, I'll get through. So that would be four components.
That's a great graphic there, and some really good things as you go around the wheels there around, opportunity for contribution, appreciation and recognition, which were all themes that were picked up before with Bernie in terms of some of the practices that they share there. So thank you very much for that. We'll have all of these in a slide pack as well for you. And for anyone that's here watching the recording hereafter, you can download these slides and use these within your organisation. We hope they're really helpful for you. Let's move into next on how do we help people get through this. We've got a whole bunch from our live poll. We know that there's a whole bunch of people here today who are saying we're seeing an increase in mental and emotional support needs. So let's wrap up the show now with both of you sharing with us, how do we help people get through this? And how are we looking after our team's well-being while working remotely? And I'll start with you, Leanne.
Yeah, and I'd love to address the question that came up around caring for the carers or the CEOs, because it's certainly any leader of any size organisation, you're often the last person that anybody thinks about. No one checks in with the CEO to see how they're going. It's usually the other way around. You're looking after everybody else. I think it's a really relevant question and really important. If you could just pop up that slide, Julia, that would be great. Thank you. And certainly fitting your own oxygen mask and tending to your own self-care needs first is super, super important. And that as a CEO, that may be tapping into understanding what resources what helps you self-resource during this time. Is that separating what your to-do list from what you need to fulfill yourself and to re-energize yourself, so that you do have the ability to be able to support the team through this. It could be doing some mindfulness activities, spending time out in nature, gardening, doing some art, spending time with family, laughing, dancing. What is it that makes you feel good, even if it's just for a few minutes? And listen to that, because that's super important. If you can't look after yourself first, you'll find that becomes very difficult to look after other people. So that first and foremost, if there's only one thing on this list as a leader that you look at, it's that one. Listen, and listen some more. Ask the team what they need, how they will tell you what they need rather than having to make assumptions. The moment you assume, you'll get it wrong. So ask the team what they need and listen to the suggestions that they likely have for how they can work, what support they need from you, what support they need from others, and what support or help they might need externally. And don't be afraid to refer somebody on. If you're the CEO, there's sometimes an expectation that you have to have all the answers or know how to support everybody through it. The reality is you won't. There might be times where you do need to talk to somebody externally or refer them on to a professional for some further support. So ensuring those support resources are available, even if it's some links to websites, and we've got some that will be shared as part of the slide pack, both for self-care and some of Beyond Blue's resources. Helping create some pockets of certainty and moments of assurance. So again, with all this uncertainty happening, what can you talk about, what can you share, and what can you create that just provides those little moments of, we know what we have to do to get through the end of the day, the end of the week, the end of the month. And that might be as much as you can give the team at this point in time. But look for those pockets, because we all grab onto those pockets of certainty when there's so much uncertainty around. Structure and clarity becomes really important when people are going through trauma or challenges or high anxiety. So taking what can be quite a big problem, that old take a slice off the elephant and eat it slowly. How can you break things down and provide some real clarity around what you expect from the team? Again, at the end of the day, at the end of the week, from them, and how to prioritise what's important. Maybe there's self-care and them taking a day out or switching the video off so that they don't feel like they're constantly getting Zoom overload. Maybe that's what they need to support them at that point in time. So put that out there and provide options, both to reduce the noise and make sure that people are not overloading. But again, asking each of the team members what they need and considering the different options that might need to be available to them to best support them. We're all different. We will all have an extremely different journey through COVID and life in general. And the person that can best tell you what they need is the person who you're asking. But foremostly, encourage time out for daily exercise, mindfulness and connection. Super important, and it draws on some of the things that Adam talked about in resilience. The combination of all of that will support a really resilient, put an individual to be resilient. But even little things like, how can you introduce a gratitude practice into meetings? What are you grateful for today? When everything seems chaotic and in disharmony around you, what are you grateful for?
Beautiful. They're really great. Fantastic. And we'll share those in the slide pack as well. You might have other people that that might want to just have those as a little cheat sheet on the side as some tips there. There's certainly some things there that I know that I haven't been practicing that I could put into my weekly schedule with the community that that I get to run here as well. Leanne, you've also got another final slide here that you've prepared, and thank you for putting together this content for everybody. It was looking after your team's well-being while working remotely. Can we go through that finally, and then we'll get some final thoughts and comments from you? It's 12:33. It's unbelievable how fast this 90-minute actually goes. Over to you, Leanne.
Sure, if you're able to share that slide, that would be great. Thank you.
Okay, go for it.
So I'll go through this one fairly quickly. When building on everything that Bernie's already talked about, respecting that people's circumstances will be different and no one experience will be the same as another person. So knowing your team, as Bernie said, plays a really important part of that. Trusting, embracing trust, even if you may never have needed to trust the team when they're all in the same office, trusting them and being transparent about what's going on when they're all removed from each other goes a long way to supporting them. Being realistic about what to expect, and as Bernie said, taking a strengths-based approach rather than looking at the things that may not be working, but recognising that you may not get the same output that you would get on a regular day if everybody's together face-to-face, or if the levels of anxiety are not as high as they are at the moment. Ask flexibility. What do you need to do your job? How can we best support you? And in turn, just be really clear about what they can be doing to support the organisation through this challenge. But focus less on the time that you're spending on the computer, the time that you're spending working, and look much more at what are the outcomes that that are coming out of from the team and from the individual, rather than you were online from 9:10 this morning till 4:58. I was expecting you to be there until 5 o'clock. So recognise that flexibility is a really big and important part of this at the moment. And reducing the expectation for team members to prove that they're working. I've heard that a lot. People going, oh, I didn't feel like I could go and have a lunch break because I'm supposed to be online all the time. So just watch for those behaviours as well. And recognising that introverts and extroverts like different things. Some of your extroverts are probably missing the communication and the connection like crazy. Your introverts might be loving being at home, but they might not be as well. So don't make any assumptions about that. But again, ask, and don't assume.
Fantastic. And just on this final slide here, you've got some great links there and some useful resources. We'll get this slide pack out to you as soon as possible so you can go and have a look at those. Maybe just take a screenshot on your computer now. The Beyond Blue is the most extensive sort of workplace coronavirus resource at the moment. We had Beyond Blue on the show last week, and it was amazing in terms of all the resourcing that they're putting in there as well. So please feel free to go and also share with people that these resources are available. Thank you very much for that, Leanne. Just to wrap up, Adam, any final thoughts, comments on supporting teams through the coming weeks and months ahead?
I think Leanne covered it really well. I just say, make it fun. You know, I love the X Factor Friday night, Friday afternoon, virtual drinks. Make it fun. So what people are missing out on in this time, everybody's worried, everybody's stressed. We need pleasure in life. We need to enjoy life. So do anything you can to make the experience fun for your team members, and that will balance out the stress they're experiencing on the other end of the seesaw.
Beautiful. Thank you for that. Fun, fun, fun. Leanne, any final words, final piece of wisdom to share with us here today?
Just be kind to yourselves. Everyone's going through challenging and a time that nobody's been through before. No rules. We won't get things right. We won't necessarily get them wrong either, but be kind to yourself first and kind to others. Yeah.
Great. Thank you very much for that. Well, it's 12:37. Thank you for those there's so many here that are still with us today. We've been here for a long time today together. Thank you so much. Please feel free to jump into the chat box now and tell us what's one thing you're going to take away from here today. It feels a little bit strange here talking to all of you out there in a virtual way. So it'd be great to hear what's one thing you're going to take away from today. We do have another show next Thursday, coming up next Thursday now. We're going into weekly shows. And again, next week is all about our people, all about the people in our organisation. And we're looking at recruitment and talent challenges and opportunities that are happening for organisations at the moment. We've got an amazing organisation, the Australian Sports Foundation, coming on the show next week as well. They had done a massive recruitment and growing their organisation pre-COVID, and they're going to talk a little bit about how they're managing with this big team at this time. They're also an organisation that get hundreds and thousands of applications to work with their organisation, and they're going to talk a little bit about the processes that they've put in place as well to manage that. It might be something that we're going to see a lot more of in terms of organisations being inundated with job applications, and what some of those processes and practices might be to be able to support organisations in that space of being inundated. So come and join us for the show next week. We've got Rachel McClellan from the community, as well as Michelle Varco, two amazing recruitment specialists, women who have been a part of the sector for a combined 40, 50 years as well. So thank you so much for being here today, Adam and Leanne, sharing your knowledge and preparing for today. Some absolutely brilliant insights there, and some great materials for us to share wider as well as part of Reset 2020. So thank you very much. Thank you for everyone that's been here. Thank you, Bernie, for being on the show earlier as well. Thank you to Jackie, who's been running tech support and managing the chat box there and helping all of this run smoothly for us today. Please take care. Thank you for sharing with us today. We hope it's been really helpful for you, and we look forward to seeing you again soon. All the best.